Hey, Mike. Hey, Mark. It's Michelle. Just to let you guys know, Patrick and Jim won't be on tonight, and David won't be on.
That leaves Patty, right?
Is Patty not joining?
No, I know that leaves Patty. That's it, right?
No, we've got Lynn.
Oh, Lynn, right. Hi, Patty.
Her ears must have been ringing.
My ears?
Yes, because we just mentioned your name.
Oh, well, hi, everyone. Hopefully good things.
Well, Lynn's on. That's it, Michelle.
Yep, that's it. So, good evening, everyone. This is Michelle Capano, Chair of the Housing Production Plan Committee. It is 6:30. I'm calling the meeting to order. In attendance is Patty Karras, Michelle Capano, Michael Raworth, Lynn Spencer, and Mark Cullinan. I sent the agenda and some materials out, including the meeting minutes. I apologize, they were lengthy, but you guys have a lot to talk about. It makes it productive. So,
I mean, as I said to you before, Michelle, in my 30 years of service to the town, I've never seen such comprehensive minutes.
I know,
Well,
Michelle, you are, wow.
well, as you can tell, when you work in financial services and you have to record things, you get into that habit.
Got it. Would you
Yeah,
like to be
they-
on my committee too, on community preservation? Would you like to join that? How's that?
Are you sure about that? I thought Paul was your recording secretary. I don't want to steal his thunder.
Yeah, and it embarrasses me because, Michelle is filling in for me, doing a lot of the minutes. So I'm so appreciative because
Yeah.
I've never had to take minutes before, and when I was sitting there trying to take them and listen and participate and do it all at once, I'm like, oh my God.
Well, with the Zoom being recorded, it's a lot easier. I just do it over the weekend. So I
Wow.
think Jim is joining. He was saying he was having technical issues. So let's wait one more minute, see if he joins, and then we can go through to approve the meeting minutes.
Okay.
All right. I just apologize. I only have one screen tonight, so.
You want to start, Michelle?
Yeah, why don't we start? Okay, so moving on to the agenda, may I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from, or before I even do that, are there any questions about the minutes? Anything that needs to be changed, updated?
Mhm.
Not hearing anything, okay. So then may I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes for February 16th, 2023 and February 23rd, 2023?
So move.
Mark
Yep.
moves, may I have a second?
I second, okay,
Okay, and roll call vote. So Lynn,
yes,
Mark,
Yes.
Michael,
Aye.
Patty,
Yes.
aye, and the chair is aye. Okay, let me just. Okay, great. So the next item on the agenda was to debrief from the community engagement event. So I thought we had a great event last night. I thought, I was hoping for more. I was like hoping for 100 people, but we had about 35 people in attendance. And so I thought, that made it a nice number for a more personal approach with some of the residents and stuff, but definitely want to hear from others in terms of what you thought, how it was executed, how you felt the consultants managed it. It's good they're not on the phone tonight, so we can talk about them, but how it was managed, kind of that stuff, and just to get a sense of if hopefully we'll do another one in June. And then I did talk to them about doing a survey, so they're going to check our budget requirements and see if we can do both, which would be great. But yeah, I really like to hear others and see if there's anything we need to hone in on or do differently, or what went really well that you heard from the residents last night.
I thought the karma was good. The general atmosphere was good. I found it a little bit difficult to hear John clearly, but that's a function of the acoustics in the room. Tony said they're going to get some better amplification, and that would be helpful. And I don't
Well,
know
when
how.
we get the curtains, it's gonna make it big.
Yeah, that right, that too. I mean, I don't think we, I don't think we gave people enough for them to, for anybody who might be opposed to register opposition, because there's nothing that we told them that we're about to do because we're too early in that process. But that's
Right.
okay. I think it's good to this is the thin edge of the wedge to get people's minds started to wrap around this phenomenon. And I think the people who showed up were a good group to do that.
Yeah, I felt like, I mean, this is the first step in the process, right? It's really to get a sense of what their views are, right? You're absolutely right. If we put 5 or 10 locations in front of people, everyone's going to be all over the place. Yes, no, absolutely not. Whatever it, can we do it differently? Can we reduce this size? I expect that those types of healthy debates will eventually happen, but this was more around bringing that awareness, talking about the data, which I thought John did a nice job with the statistics. The 40%, that's a big number right now. And it's eye-opening to think that this exists in our community. I'm unsettled by it, but there's definitely something to be said. I talked to a lot of mature residents last night, and they all had the same thing. Like, I live in my big home and I do want to eventually downsize, and I'd stay in Nahant, but there's nothing for me. And I don't want to go to Swampscott. I don't want to go to Marblehead or Lynn. I want to stay here where I've been for the last 50, 60 years. Right? So, that I think is important. And I think the other pivot is when they sell, it's an opportunity for a young family to come in. So.
Right. Well, a lot of that, I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
I mean, a lot of what you just expressed, Michelle, is sort of waiting for the shoe of accessory dwelling units to drop, and that is yet to be finalized, either on the state level or on Nahant's level. And I think we got to be, that will probably come on our radar screen at some point in this connection. I think we got to be careful about seeing that as a panacea, because I think that there's some downsides that haven't been really considered about that. However, it's virtually certain to come onto our radar screen or come out of the town's radar screen.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. Just to get back to the meeting, I thought it exceeded my expectations. Honestly, Michelle, I know you were hoping for 70 or 100 people. We have town meetings that we barely get quorum for, so at 75. So I thought we did pretty good with 35 or 40 people there. I was impressed. And as you said, this is an engagement. This was, broaching the subject to the town, and it was a big learning experience, educational experience. I spoke to my mother this morning, who watched it on television. She's 94 years old, and she really enjoyed it and thought it was very accurate. She had high marks for John's presentation. Thought he did a really good job. He speaks a little quick, fast, but she got most of it. And I managed one of the boards next to Lynn, and we had some nice conversations. I thought it was really well done.
That's great.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you hadn't heard from residents before? Was there anything that sticks out that was like new information you kind of parked it back in your mind to talk about tonight?
No, but we haven't seen, at least I haven't seen the comments that were posted on the stickies, and I gather we're going to get those yet to come.
Yeah, so the consultants gathered all the materials. They're going to go through them, organize them, hopefully, and provide us, a few slides to tell us like what those comments were, what they were saying. It was the activity that was in the corner on the butcher paper, like some people who are artsy, they built their own houses. Some of them, there was a section on what I love about Nahant, people wrote the beaches, the tides. I forget what the other question was, but there was definitely, people were engaging. And people spent some time looking at reading the boards on the data and stuff. I do have one question though. So the other board that was on the other side, and it was a new slide that John showed in the presentation for the engagement side. It's a board that Heather had talked about in terms of visioning and getting people's feelings out. It was that one that had 3 components. It had the elderly, it had the families, and had the teenagers. Who managed that board? Because I didn't get an opportunity to go over there.
I did.
How
and
was the feedback on it?
I didn't have much, I mean, I had an extensive conversation with David Carter, but the people who seemed to have input on the board basically just wrote a sticky and stuck it on there.
Okay.
And so I didn't get it. I mean, I didn't get any questions, let's put it that way, from
Okay.
the population as a whole.
I did get an interesting comment though, because I was next to you.
Oh, yeah, okay,
Mike,
that's right.
in regards to like, we're missing a segment. So there's only 3 dimensions, but what about, a family, it's not their starter home, they're in their 50s. It's like, you're missing that, 3rd tier out of the 4.
Okay. That's good to know. We definitely want to bring that back to the consultants. You're right. You could be early retirees, right? Or they're slowing
We
down
would
in their
hope
career.
we could
I know,
retire at 50,
I'm
not
missing
anymore
both.
in today's day and age. No way.
I wish I wanted to be like my dad who retired at 55, but not really happening for me. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right. There could be a population of too young to traditionally retire, but they're in a place in their career where they're are slowing down to some degree and are looking for ways to save money, but change that lifestyle in a way, and they're in that income bracket.
I mean, that's true, but there's also a limit on how much you can put on one board. You could have had 12
Right.
demographic categories,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm
Let's
gonna just jump
up.
in. I'll take that hand down. I was struck by 2 things. One is I do think John could get a little coaching on speaking style. And I don't know how to do this in a way other than to say, when you talk really fast, very, very, very fast, and you never go up or down, never, it's very hard sometimes to take it in. And I do appreciate that Rini Cullinan, who is extraordinary, was able to sort of hear and absorb things. But apart from the issues of the acoustics in the room, I do think it's a little bit of a speaking style thing. And it would be good to give a little bit of gentle coaching about the value of up and down, the pause, and so on. Just a small thing.
Yeah.
But I was very struck with people being concerned not only about, place for young families and seniors and so on, but also concerns about zoning implications and, desiring to sort of limit the kind of sizes of houses on lots, to limit the sizes of how houses could be expanded on their lots. That
You mean
was
contrary to McMansions.
well, yes. I mean, we have A and B zoning out here. So on a 10,000 square foot lot, you can put a 4,000 square foot house. And that's what we see. So that was an interesting sort of twist on things. But otherwise, there was strong interest in multifamily or 2-family housing options. So I'm sort of saying they don't want to see too large of an expansion on a lot, but they would also like to be able, they would like to be able to see 2 and possibly 3-family options.
That's good.
So I thought that was
That's
interesting.
really good.
That was interesting.
Is anyone else going to be joining this meeting?
No,
Michelle?
this is it tonight, Jim. Thank you.
Okay, so the question in my mind follows from a conversation I had with John Cruz last night. I said to him, Well, first of all, at this point, my main concern is compliance with 40B, so that it frees us from the threat of unfriendly 40Bs and overdevelopment. So that means we have to comply in one of two ways, either by land area or by number of units percentage. So I said to John, I said, well, let's take somebody who has a big house, and they divide the house and put an apartment upstairs and one downstairs, and they have a nice piece of property, and they add a little tiny house in the back that they can rent. I said, now how would those units be able to be counted toward the required minimums for 40B? And he said, well, probably none of them would qualify because there would be then 3 units on one piece of property with one deed, and having a deed restriction applicable to those units. Maybe it's conceivable, but it's certainly not going to be accomplished easily. So I'm really concerned about our being able to meet the minimum number of units. As you know, my preference is to go by the land area, but that's a real problem. I don't see how we're going to get that. So if we say we think we're going to have, a number of different places around town with 3-family houses or what have you, more units may be created, but whether they could be counted against our goal, which is to comply with the law, is problematic. I don't think they can, or it's difficult to achieve.
And I think we need to consider too, let's say that the floodgates open on accessory dwelling units and there's a large number of those added. Those may count toward the wrong number, toward the 1,600 and some units in town, and therefore increase the number of subsidized housing units.
Stop right there, Mike. Stop right there. Cannot count, ADUs cannot count towards subsidized housing, and be careful how you say that, because
I understand that.
separate,
That's
very separate and distinct.
That's the point. They cannot count toward the number we need to increase, but they may count toward the number that is the denominator, the number that of which we need to get 10%. So let's say we get 100 new accessory dwelling units. That may mean that there's 1,700 units in town, and therefore we got to get 172 or something like that subsidized housing units in order to be bulletproof against hostile 40B.
So I want to go back to the point that I made several meetings ago. I would think that we could deal with this in a binary fashion. We should actually proceed to actually do as much as we can to assure 40B protection through the GLAM analysis and the guidance that has given us. At the same time, we should be strong advocates for finding other affordable solutions throughout the town. And so one deals with the 40B thing, the other deals with, a clear need as expressed by the townspeople for more housing opportunities. And I feel strongly that those should be dispersed throughout the town. I think incorrectly, perhaps I use the term, I don't want the affordable housing to be ghettoized, meaning I didn't want it to be all in one sort of small area.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be thought of town-wide.
I agree.
And I say that again so I can go into the minutes, Michelle, thank you.
No problem.
And we just don't want, all the affordable housing over here, and then the rest of the community has something else. It needs to be around. And so to me, that idea of accessory dwellings where people are willing to accept a deed restriction for capital A affordable housing is a very attractive thing and maybe part of the zoning, so the creativity that has to come into the zoning situation. And it may be that they're simply, going to be small A affordable housing units, and those, are on trust, by the owners who are willing to do it. I don't know. I know it's a more complicated situation, but
Let me,
to me, it's two different tracks.
Lynn, I couldn't agree with you more. And I was going to speak to that myself. There are two different issues going on here. Jim, you're right. Let me first just say this. Someone who's been involved in this for a number of years, the town is not under the immediate threat of 40B right now, particularly with the fact that we are engaged in a housing production plan. So we're looking at 2 or more years before we are even threatened by that. I think, but it's not something we should ignore. It's important. And I agree with you, Jim and Lynn and Mike. I think you all say, we're not going to meet it with housing units. That's just not going to happen, I don't think, in my mind. If we're going to meet it, it's going to meet it with the GLAM. And
Meet it with what, Mark?
with the
GLAM
GLAM,
analysis.
right, with the GLAM analysis. And I agree with Lynn, that GLAM analysis can't plop it on one place in one part of the town, because that's not going to work. So, I think we've got a lot of breathing room here. There were 2 things going on. There's the 3A thing, which I'm not overly concerned with at all, less so than the 40B. And the 40B thing, there's no immediate threat for that right now, in my mind. I don't think it's in Tony's mind. So I'm viewing this as a housing needs assessment for the town. And, whether or not, the accessory dwelling units or some other zoning changes can help people better meet their housing needs, I think that's important. But, I don't think this whole process should be driven by, do we meet the 40B requirements? That is not on my mind right now.
Well, obviously, it's on my mind, and but I understand your point here, Mark. But when you say, we're not under immediate threat, a couple of years, I mean, we're trying to make decisions that would have an impact on this town for not, 2 years, but for 10 years or more. So that's in my mind, and I understand completely your point, Lynn, in terms of ghettoization. I get that. The thing that bothers me about that is the subsidized housing units that keep coming up around the periphery of our discussions. And if it is a requirement that in order to be counted toward 40B, it has to be a subsidized housing unit, then I think that's problematic if we think we're going to spread that all over town.
These aren't subsidized, Jim.
Yeah,
I mean, that was responded to.
I'm sorry. Say that again, Lynn?
They're not subsidized units. They're things that count under the affordable thing. What we do find is that the 48 we have right now do count towards our affordable, but the affordable units are not subsidized.
I will send a quote from the housing need, which I had right now. I don't. Which seems to predict that. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It's still very much a question. Housing unit is required. If it's required, how it's required.
Hey, Jim, it's Michelle.
If it
You're
Let me
you're
just
breaking
interject
up.
for 1 second. I'm having a hard time hearing you. I would
Yeah.
suggest turning off your monitor because we're
Well,
having a hard time hearing
Yeah,
you
we
and you'll
can't
get
hear you.
a stronger bandwidth.
Yeah, you should, well, I don't know what else I can do. Am I?
No,
is it better?
I'm suggesting shut off your monitor
Your video,
for your video for a
Shut
few
off
minutes.
video.
Yeah,
I comb
just
my
so we
hair.
can hear you.
I comb my hair, I brush my teeth.
I know you look wonderful, but that
Right,
that is a
fine,
trigger to
fine,
increase
fine.
greater bandwidth.
All right, let me try to find out how to do that.
in the
Okay,
lower
Yeah,
left-hand corner,
There it is,
yeah.
there it is. Okay,
perfect.
all right.
Loud and clear.
All right, so I guess, just what I was saying was I'm concerned about the next 10 years. I'm also concerned about the how a subsidized unit, housing unit, if that's the correct phrase, how much of that is required in order to comply. I thought I saw language in the housing needs assessment, which indicated that it is required in order to comply. But I think we have to have John Cruz. What I'll do, Michelle, if you don't mind, is I will send you the precise question
Okay,
that I have. And but I can't share that with anybody else, right?
yeah, that's fine.
Well, the definitions are tricky and I mean, they're not user friendly. I read the thing the same way Jim does, Lynn, that it is an inventory of subsidized housing units. And even that definition taken apart from affordable is tricky, but we can come back to that.
So-
Now, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, I'm just looking up the housing needs assessment. So
Right.
under 40B, it says Massachusetts municipalities need to have 10% subsidized housing inventory.
Right.
Okay, but the way that inventory is calculated could be a combination of different needs, right? We have the traditional housing authority, right? But you could have deed restricted
Yep.
that contribute to that,
Yep.
where the owner accepts like what we call a Section 8, right? To allow for that subsidy.
Not necessarily Section 8. I mean, it
But no,
can
I'm just
be,
using it as an example.
Right.
That's the contribution to the 10%. So it's not all subsidized. It's just a combination or a calculation of different elements making up to that 10%.
yeah, except that for an owner to accept a deed restriction, virtually nobody's going to do that voluntarily because it means that it limits the market value of their property. So they're going to look for some sort of payment in exchange for.
Well, yeah,
that.
it'll be a break on the real estate taxes, basically, to make it financially sound for them to do it. That's basically what it's gonna come down to.
Right,
That
and
may or may not work.
Well, it may, but just think about it. Right now, there's a prohibition against doing it. So if you were
Against, I'm
actually
sorry, against doing what?
having multi-family units on your property. So
Right,
if you then actually allow people to do that, and so they're actually being able to sort of have that additional rental income, and the rental income is not insubstantial. I mean, affordable housing doesn't mean that it's zero rent. It means that it's less rent, but it still allows you to do something that right now you're prohibited from doing.
yeah, so I
Right.
think
Our
in Lynn's
zoning.
example, she's saying if I have a single family and I convert it to a 2-family and I rent out the first floor at, say, $1,300 a month, which is well below market rate and allows for someone that would be considered on some type of financial support, that could be calculated into our requirements. On top of it, the town would give them some type of tax relief because if they wanted to get market rate of say $2,000 a month, they're not going to be able, they're going to be benefiting somewhere else.
Well, this is the first I've heard about tax relief, and I'm not sure
But
that
that's just one example, but there would have to be some type of financial benefit for them. And the only way to do that is through real estate taxes. I don't know of
No,
any
you
other
could-
way
you
unless
could-
there's
that's-
something from a
There could
from
be
an IRS or a state piece, but I've never seen it.
well, the town could allocate formal subsidy payments.
I don't know about that, but
No, I don't, the town wouldn't.
Uh,
The subsidy payments would come through programs that would
Well, you might,
allow
you might be,
someone to
you
live
might
there.
be able to get some sort of state grant. But the bottom line is that homeowners are going to expect to get paid something considerable, and it may be more than tax relief in order to accept deed restrictions. And everything we've been talking about now assumes that there's going to be legislation that permits accessory dwelling units.
Yeah.
And we don't know that that's the case. And even on a local basis, the town might or might not accept it. So we got a number of questions we got to have answered in terms of what qualifies.
So I want to just go back to, because where we are on the agenda was just to debrief from the community engagement. Some of this is segued into the new business topic, so we can definitely pick it up. But before we continue, I just want to make sure, is there anything else about the community event that we need to debrief on? Is there anything that I can bring back to the consultants? You know, I'm going to be following up with them, finding out when they'll have an update for us in terms of the community feedback that written feedback that they got. You know, I should check with them too. If we collected email addresses and stuff, we could always do like a, you know, after engagement survey or something, but I can check with Krista on that. That's possible.
I do have some comments as we get down the list on how we can use the event to plan for our next community event. But
Right.
I don't want to leave the subject we're on right now, Michelle,
Okay.
for a moment, because I think some important points are coming out.
Sure.
And they keep on coming up in every meeting, and I think we should just try to flush them out as best we could among ourselves. In my opinion, I first stated I don't think we're on an immediate threat of 40B. And secondly, I don't think we're ever going to meet the 10% goal in this town. We're just not gonna, that's not gonna happen. So let's stop focusing on that and like how we're gonna get there. We're not gonna get there with the 10%, in my opinion. The only threshold we're gonna meet is under the GLAM analysis. And I think that is possible to do.
You mean the 1.5% of land area?
Yes.
Mhm.
And I think that's very, very possible to do. And I think we should just stop focusing on this 10% and how we're going to expand 175 units or something in town to meet those standards. It's not going to happen. We're just spinning our wheels.
Mhm.
And, let's focus on the GLAM and meeting that threshold. But I don't think that's an immediate need right now. I think the immediate need is to look at our housing needs and how we can best address them. And that is part of our housing needs. I understand that. But there is more to it than just that.
Well, you may not feel the immediate need, Mark, but we've also got to recognize that we're a town with a very limited area that's not already built upon. And we're coming together in something that's a unique opportunity. I don't think we're going to get another grant to do another committee like this a couple of years down the road.
Right,
So,
but Mike, we're looking at maybe finding another acre of land. Okay,
Yeah,
that's what
really.
we're looking,
Yeah.
That's
that's
it.
what we're looking at. Another acre of land in the town of Nahant. That's it.
okay, well, then if we agree that that's the approach, and if we agree we can find it and get it approved, then we've solved that problem, and that's excellent. And I don't have any further problem, but you seem to be saying, Mark, that we can afford to postpone coming to that solution. And I don't think that that's a wise thing to do with the resources that we have with this committee constituted and with a consultant paid for and so forth. If we can achieve the 1.5%, God bless us all. I don't have any further problem with that.
Well, all I'm trying to say is, Mike, we're not going to hit the 10%. That's not going to happen.
Okay, so we need to begin to identify chunks of land that can be appropriately designated as to get us to 1.5%.
That'd be a better, that would be a
Sorry?
better use of our time, yes.
Okay, and I mean, we've got other things to do, of course, but I think we don't have to do it immediately, but I think it would be unwise not to solve that problem with this gathering, with this group of people and effort that's gone into it, and postpone our vulnerability.
I agree, Mike.
So let me ask you this, Mark, are you thinking, let me get rid of this. Are you thinking that we would be able to show the state that we have identified this 1.5% of land area, or say the additional acre, and that our plan is to develop those, or have somebody else develop them, or depend on current owners to change the nature of their property and their deeds? Let me say a little bit more about that.
I think if we come out of this housing production plan with some of that data, that this is what we're working on, we're moving towards the GLAM analysis component of the, of the threshold, and we begin to identify those areas, because they're not going to count to the GLAM until we build the housing, until people are living there. So, right, it's not going to count until it's built out. So that's not going to happen in the next year, 2 or 3, maybe even 4 or 5 years. But I think the state would be understanding in sort of preventing 40B developments going on if we're in this sort of process. We've identified it. I think that we'd be in pretty good shape.
I'm less optimistic than you are on that, Mark. And one of the reasons is, from my perception of the geography around Greater Boston, Nahant has to become a target at some point, because it's a half hour, 35 minutes from downtown Boston, but it's a small town. We know what's good about this town. And when the more people and the more developers look at the map and say, where can we get the most money for, or say the most profit? I think Nahant has to be up there toward the top of the list.
Yeah, and I think that's where we come in with the, if we're going to identify some parcels in town and that could serve this purpose, the town entering into a friendly 40B with some developers could solve that problem. Particularly if it's a rental development. If it's a rental development, then so you could have 25. You could do a section in town, say, a quarter of an acre, and put a development there. If it's and 25% of that is affordable, but if it's rental, they all count.
They all count.
So, and all of that area counts. So I mean, if you do 25% of, so let's say elephant in the room, Coast Guard housing, 25%, and it was privately owned, and 25% of that was going to be affordable, then only 25% of that land area is going to be accounted for. If it's all rental, then 100% of that. If it's all rental and 25% of the units are affordable, then 100% of the land area is allowed.
So you're advocating developing that whole parcel then? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, that's not what he said.
No, that isn't what he said.
Well,
That's what I said.
not exactly.
I'm sorry. The example, as I understood it, Mark, was if you have that 1 acre and you develop it with 25% of it and it's deed restricted, then you can count all of it. Is that what you were saying?
Only if they're rentals.
Oh,
Only
yeah.
if it's rental.
It's
That's what
not
we're
owner
talking about.
occupied.
Right.
Yeah, so let's be clear about the distinction.
Right, I know, I understand that.
I mean, the town could specify that in the restriction of the 1.5%, that any development qualifies under that criterion.
All I'm saying is that I thought I heard Mark saying that you could build on that acre at Coast Guard housing units that would be countable, or that land area would be countable if you had all rental units there.
No,
No.
that's not what he's saying.
Oh, no, I'm
What-
just, all
Yes.
rental units, 25% of which would be affordable.
Go ahead, Lynn, you explain. Maybe
Yes.
you're better than I can.
No, I'm going to let Michelle. She was starting.
No, I'm good, Lynn. Thank you.
If you actually do the whole site and and you actually make this into affordable rentals, then it gets counted.
Mhm.
That's just all it is.
Yeah, but the distinction that is trying to be drawn is the comprehensive permit or comprehensive plan as was attempted in 2008, which
No, that
permits.
That was
that was
different.
different. That was different.
That was
The-
very
the-
different.
That was very different.
Only 25% of
It was
the,
only 25% of that property was going to be affordable and the rest was going to be market rate.
And it was
I-
going to be owner occupied, not
Yes.
rentals.
Exactly. They
the
were going to
key
be
thing is the
condominiums and
rentals.
single family homes. and the
Okay,
single-family
I was
homes were on Castle.
misinformed. Jeff told me last night that the 2008 plan was going to create a bunch of units, only some of which were qualified for income restricted, but all of which would count toward the 40B numbers threshold. Now, maybe I was misinformed, but the point is that it is possible to have a development, a comprehensive plan development by a commercial developer, let's say, who dedicates 25% of the units to with deed restrictions to affordability, and that all of the units therefore thereupon qualify for whatever the threshold is. No?
No.
No.
So I think there are two distinctions here that we need to clarify. One is about owner occupied properties, single family homes, condos, townhouses.
Mm.
The other is about rental units.
Yep.
And this 25% topic, right? If a developer comes in and develops a piece of property and says 25% of these rental units are going to be affordable / subsidized, right? Whatever
Yep.
the terminology is, then 100% of them will count towards 40B.
no, I don't believe so. 100% of the land area will count.
Land
toward-
area.
Oh, land area. Let me clarify.
That's where
Land
that's where
area.
that glam becomes
The
very
glam
important.
piece, the right,
Yep.
you're right, the glam piece. Now, it doesn't work the same if they're owner occupied.
Right.
Homes, townhomes, condos.
I never suggested owner occupied in what I was
Okay.
saying. I thought I said the same thing that you just said, but whatever.
Okay.
I mean, once again, we don't have to necessarily use the Coast Guard housing, but it's the easiest thing to think about for these
Right.
purposes. So if that sufficed for land area and we could dedicate it, have the town set it aside and restrict it so that any development on it met the criteria we just described, and then it were put out for development and properly developed, that would satisfy our 40B requirement. Are we all on the same page about that?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Okay, so then the question is, politically, how do we identify parcels in addition to be considered or to be included so as to spread the impact around the town and avoid a political firestorm over there adjacent to the school?
I
Well,
mean, go ahead, Lynn.
And also be responsive to actually, making this diverse throughout the town. So what I should have said, one of the things I heard about last night is being able to walk to the public library.
Mhm.
to the town hall, to the Richdale, you
To the
know, to the Council on Aging Tiffany Room. So that is not from over there. That's from something that is closer to, you know, Big Nahant and so on. So that's where we're looking at some of the very large mansions that we have. And somebody said to me last night, oh, the Patterson House would have been a perfect example, you know, and maybe it would have. But, you know, where you could have multiple units within one of our wonderful historic buildings.
Mhm.
The Edge Hill, for instance, one of our old hotels, now condoized. You know, if we could be actually buying condos there and then actually deed restricting those condos so that, you know, they're part of our, you know, making opportunities for people to stay. What's wrong with that?
Yeah,
That's the kind of thing where I think we have to start being
country
creative.
club. The country club.
The
Yeah,
country
the
club is a very good
Country Club is a
example.
good example.
right. You
Very
mean
good
you mean
example.
the unbuilt area of the country club, the bare land area of the country club?
Well,
I mean,
No,
the building.
the building,
Ah,
there are apartments upstairs. You could rehab those apartments to be more fully livable than what they are. And
Yeah.
I don't think they have kitchens. They have like a
No,
kitchenette. It's very,
it's like a
sparse.
it's a rooming house.
it's a rooming house, but
Okay,
you could
so-
modernize them.
you take those
And-
units, you take those, take other commercially available units now, and you're saying that the town would acquire those, put them under the the Nahant Housing Authority, and therefore add them to the inventory.
Yes.
Okay,
So are you saying that when you say we could buy these condo, who's the we? The town would buy
Yes.
those,
Yeah.
200,000, 300,000, 400,000 of units?
That's right. Yeah.
Mhm.
oh,
Yep.
okay, that sounds very constructive and good to consider, except that the way I understand the 40B requirement, we've got to address a fork in the road. The left fork is 1.5% of the land area. The right
Yeah.
fork is a number of units.
Yeah,
And
but
so
every-
what we've just been talking about is on the number of units criteria rather than land area criteria.
Yeah,
No.
but Mike, you know, 3 units in the Edge Hill, 4 units in the country club, you know, some other area. Not only does it count towards the 10%, but a percentage of that counts towards the glam also.
Yeah, but I mean, my understanding is, maybe I'm wrong, that you can't mix and match between percentage of town footprint and number of units, that you got to choose one or the other.
Well, here's my point. I mean, I think that like Coast Guard housing area, right now, without the Coast Guard housing property, we're within an acre, I believe, or
We're very
less,
close.
or less than meeting our glam threshold.
Mhm.
If you used a portion of the Coast Guard housing property, that could probably take a quarter to a half of that acre. And
When
then
you say-
we're looking at another half acre someplace else in town. That's all we're looking for.
What's your sense of the total acreage that's required to get 1.5%, Mark?
Right now, we're at what, about a little over 1%
Mhm. Yeah.
with our existing affordability, subsidized housing. So right now,
The NHA area constitutes
right,
about
all-
an acre.
we're a little over an acre right now. So we need like, I don't know exactly. Let's say, I think we're at 0.88. Jim, do you know? I think
I
like
don't.
8. I think 0.8. So we need like less than an acre. So
We're
I
very
think-
close.
Yeah, we're very close. We can use, so like a quarter of an acre could be at the Coast Guard housing, and another quarter of an acre could be someplace else.
Yeah,
mean,
like the country club. I mean,
Like the
so
country club, or like, there's plenty of places that we can look at. I mean, let's stop focusing on this 10% stuff. We're not gonna get there.
No, nobody, Mark, you need to chill out a little bit. Nobody's taken away from the focus that you suggested. I'm just trying to figure out. I'm assuming that selecting individual existing dwelling units, condos or stuff that's in apartment inventory will not count toward the 1.5%, but can only count toward the 10%. Now,
Yeah.
maybe I'm wrong about
Oh,
that.
I think you're right.
Okay, so if we're trying to satisfy this by using the 1.5%, then I suggest that at least for that goal alone, we need to put to one side the notion of acquiring individual condo units or, sections of existing housing and focus on land area, square footage. And then return after that to existing housing stock to fill more, if you will, not generic, but needs that are not driven by statute.
I agree, Mike, 100%.
So is there a map currently existing of potential land area to be developed?
No,
No.
not yet. Not yet. Haven't got
We-
there yet.
We can take a town map and, identify locations where, that makes up the acreage. Talk about other opportunities.
And
We
that
talked about
would be
Greystone Road,
public
we've talked about High
knowledge
Street.
For
So, and there could be other things too. There's a foreclosure on Fox Hill Road. There's another
Right.
piece of property up for sale at the end of Pleasant Street, which is 13,000 square feet. Take that home down and you could develop that. So there are those types of things. What the encumbrance is trying to get grants or financing to acquire property, right?
Right.
That's the challenge, because I think if we can acquire the property and then find a developer to develop, that will be the easy part. It's acquiring the property first.
Yeah, and I think, and CPA, Lynn, is part of that funding.
Right. Absolutely. We understand that.
I think, Lynn, you and I had this conversation before. I mean, if there was, 8 houses on Castle Road, for example, why doesn't the town buy one of those lots through the CPA and build an affordable house?
I think I keep wanting to do the old pharmacy.
Well,
There it is.
It's
It's
another place, right? Another
a beautiful
example.
little thing. Just
mean,
sitting
yeah.
there.
That's a great idea, because
Right.
it's residential now. They lost their commercial use.
Mhm.
So whatever goes over there will just be a standalone, single family home. Could be
And
about,
it's-
1,500 square feet.
Yeah, and it's a very small site, Michelle. There's
Yeah.
just no, what you're doing there, you're only doing on that footprint, and you're actually, having
Yeah.
to tangle with a building inspector on how much you can build. So, but there are those, I think there's those quirky sites, there are these quirky places that we need to look at in the smallest places, quite
Right.
honestly.
You know,
And that's what I
Lynn
mean
did-
about dispersing it throughout the town.
So
Lynn,
can I ask?
Lynn, the city of Lynn over the years has done a great job doing
Right.
this. There's a lot of little fill-in areas. You all notice them driving through Lynn. You
Yep.
see these nice little houses being built in neighborhoods. Those are
But-
all through Lynn Housing Development.
Lynn
Yes.
Housing Development with Habitat. I used to
Yeah.
volunteer over there with Habitat,
They're
and
everywhere.
they're very good.
They
They're very
fit in
good.
neighborhoods, they work, they blend in. I mean, there's plenty of opportunities in this town to do that.
So can I ask this question? Because I saw this today on social media. Someone mentioned there's house lots adjacent to Willow Road and Pond Street by White Way. Is that true?
Yes, it is true.
It is. So those are really buildable lots, or are we purposely maintaining that as open space for wetlands purposes and flooding?
No, they're not owned by the town.
Oh,
Okay. So the town does not own them. And when I was town administrator, I remember getting a call from an estate of someone who had owned them or something and suggested building 8 units. And I'm saying that that's not going to happen, first of all, because of the location. You never get through the Conservation Commission or DEP. And secondly, it's a dead end road.
Right.
yeah, and
And-
you can't have dead ends anymore. You need to have, just went through this with the
Right.
planning board
exactly.
for
you
over
know.
off of Pleasant Street. So
So
yeah,
after give and take on that, they whoever the attorney was for this estate or the estate itself just went away, and I've never heard from them again, but
So what's with dead end roads that you can't have?
There's a restriction now in Massachusetts. You can't have a dead end road. It has to connect to another street or have enough frontage and acreage for emergency vehicles to turn around. So it has to be a cul-de-sac.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
So these properties that we're talking about that are, if you will, ripe for plucking, are course of assuming that we select some of them as being worthy of consideration. What would need to happen pursuant to our recommendation would not be simply changing the zoning of these parcels, but instead the town acquiring them,
mhm,
either by outright negotiated purchase or by eminent domain, correct?
correct.
Okay. And obviously eminent domain is not for free. It may not be market rate, well, it's supposed to be market rate. But essentially acquiring more square footage to add to the existing square footage that's currently owned by the Nahant Housing Authority, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the square footage that we occupy, that we acquire, would show progress toward our goals in terms of the plan that we come up with. But in order to get long-term protection against a hostile 40B, each of these properties would have to be developed by some private developer pursuant to a comprehensive permit, right?
Yes, well, my understanding of the 40B is it would have to be a governmental agency, a recognized nonprofit, or some sort of LLC that is registered with the state for this type of thing. For that the state recognizes under 40B. I think those are the three entities that could do the development.
Okay. Right. But one way or another, the town is going to have to go to some expense to get over the threshold, if you will. Perhaps one property at a time.
Yes, I think one of the ways of doing it is either working hand in hand with the Nahant Housing Authority or working with a nonprofit.
Would the Preservation Trust be interested in that sort of thing?
Well, I'm not a member of that, so I couldn't tell you.
I think the Trust Preservation Trust has lots to do,
Okay.
lots.
But Jim,
there are housing
there
authorities.
are nonprofits out there that would.
There are, yeah.
Well,
In fact, Jim, you identified one, Jim. The Beverly Group.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Didn't you identify a affordable housing nonprofit in Beverly?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you talked about that. Yep.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be that difficult to create a new one if we needed to.
Yes,
Right.
but it would be fine to work with somebody who's been through the ropes.
But they face exactly the kinds of financial issues that anybody would face, whether it was a private developer, a nonprofit developer,
Right.
it's the economics of it are a challenge.
And that's absolutely true. And that's one of the reasons why our small military housing parcel is a tough place to develop, because it's just not big enough for a commercial developer to be really happy about.
That's exactly right. Or a nonprofit. When I talked with them, they were aware of the challenge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
So
we're
what
not
kind
going
of thresholds was the nonprofit looking for in terms of development? Was it number of units or acres, or what were they?
I don't want to be too factual on that, because I'm not sure my memory
Okay.
exactly. But they were saying for that area where the Coast Guard housing is, they would think they would need to put like 45 units or something like that.
Okay.
To
I mean,
break even.
There are smaller projects that were done in Swampscott, like the Macomb School.
Mhm.
And that's a good example. I mean, they converted the school and made it affordable housing. We should probably do some research on that developer and see what
Mhm.
they would consider for Nahant. And if not Nahant, maybe they have recommendations for other developers that,
Yeah.
Well,
Nahant would be a match for them.
we're not going to get a bigger parcel than the Coast Guard parcel. And so to the extent that somebody needs more footprint than that in order to develop it, we've got a problem to start out with.
Well, we could be like Swampscott and start taking property by eminent domain too. They've had a couple of acquisitions the past 2 years where they've done that. And there is property in town where we could do that.
Yes, but I mean, that solves the problem, the initial problem of getting the square footage under our belt.
Right.
Getting it built is a second challenge, and that's what I'm talking about. And the fact that people have turned down development at the Coast Guard housing suggests that it would be even more difficult to attract a developer to build in a way that satisfies 40B on even smaller parcels.
Well, location's everything. If the acquisition of a property larger, how big did we say the Coast Guard housing was? Was it 40,000 square feet or it's less than that?
For what, Michelle?
The Coast Guard
Or-
housing,
Yeah, for a development.
3 acres.
There's 3 acres over there?
Not quite 3 acres, no, I think it's a little
Okay,
less.
so that's 120,000 square feet. Okay. So I can only think of one other place, but that's, maybe 30,000 square feet. I don't know if that's big enough. Probably not. But it
Big
would
enough
be
for-
a taking, so
Big enough for what?
for development.
To attract a developer to come in and,
Yes.
yeah,
For what purpose?
to
To-
build the sort of units that we're talking about, to build the
Yeah,
sort of.
it would probably be more like apartments or condos than it would be single family homes.
To meet our glam or to meet our 10%?
Glam.
To glam.
Our 1.5%.
It would be expensive. That's the problem because it's on Hot Road.
What are you talking about?
So Could
What
be
what parcel?
So it could be the front parcel of the country club,
Right.
right?
Okay, you know what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not supporting it. it's an option. That's all it
Yeah.
is.
What's
Yeah.
the matter, Lynn?
I just am very aware that this is being recorded and I really would love to just,
Right.
actually have more of a methodical process about this. So
Mhm.
that's all.
Well, I mean,
So
So-
what do you suggest we do instead of what we're doing?
Well, right now, first of all, our consultants aren't involved with this, so they're not part
Right.
of this conversation. And, we're actually wrestling with, the glam and this other thing. I think the thing we need to do is to actually get out the maps, really sort of think about the categories of, opportunity here. And, put them on a chart or put them on the table or put them on the screen. Right now, it's bouncing around for me. That's all.
so I think, Lynn, that's a great idea. We could do it at our next meeting. I can pull
Yep.
the GIS maps for Nahant.
Yep,
And we can go
exactly.
section by section and talk about what we know of different locations. I've already started my own list of
Mhm.
locations and I'm happy to share it. And we can just use it as it's a starting point. It's not a end all be all, but there could be other locations that have that you know of that I don't know of. And that's how we can start pinpointing it.
I'd
Yeah,
like to,
I mean,
I like
I-
the suggestion on that topic. I think we should have an in-person meeting. We should all be in the same room with the maps and look at it.
I think that would be good,
be
Jim.
the
Yeah, I
easiest-
would agree.
Okay.
Huh?
Yep.
I would agree with that. Mhm.
Yeah, that would be the easiest way to have that conversation.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can talk to Tony and have a projector set up and then I can show the maps from the computer on a projector. And then
Mhm.
people can walk up and actually look at the locations.
Mhm.
Okay,
Alright. We've got a 36-inch map downstairs. We're on the table. There's only 7 of us. We can sit around the table and use a
That's it. Yep.
look at
That
it.
sounds like a fine idea. And so Mike, that was my issue is we're bouncing things around and I just, would like to be methodical about it and put some pins on a map and start moving it that way.
Right.
So we have a lot to share.
Mhm.
I wonder if we might be able to do that next week, because I'm going to be away for a couple of weeks after that.
So let me just talk about next week. The 13th and the 14th, the planning board is having public hearings on Airbnb. The 16th is the rail trail meeting with the state that's been like widely publicized, and I already signed up for that. So the 15th is the Board of Selectmen's meeting, and I don't think people want to meet on a Friday morning.
Oh, dear. Oh, well.
But so it may be a good time, like Jim, like you said you're going to be away for a couple weeks. We can wait until you come back so we can get a full quorum of everyone to have this discussion. Meanwhile, it gives our consultants a few weeks to work on, analyzing some of the results. I can still connect with them and send updates to the committee on where their progress is.
Okay. That's fine with
Okay.
me, but
Is this fine with everybody else? I don't think we need a vote on it, do we?
No, I don't.
Yeah, okay.
So have you identified dates you're thinking of, Michelle? Or actually, when do you get back, Jim?
let's see. I think I come back on the 11th.
Of April.
Yeah,
You're going on a nice trip somewhere.
Japan.
That's great.
Ooh, very nice.
I'm gonna be gone the second half of April.
Got a narrow window.
Oh, yeah.
So the 13th, April 13th, does that work for folks? Or we could do, the problem is April, I'm just because Lynn has CPC and we get close to closing up the warrant and stuff. I don't want to take time that some folks, need to be with their other committees.
I'm done. Our
You're done.
committee is done.
Okay, good.
So, I mean, we've drafted our articles. I mean, we have to go through the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen, but we've actually have drafted our articles. We had kind of a slim year so we're
13th
saving up money.
That's good.
Good.
13th sounds good to me.
Okay, so April 13th, we'll reconvene. So get that one out of the way.
Thank you very much.
That. Okay. So we've talked about GLAM and 40B, which was part of our new business discussion. Want to just take a step back to anything else from the community engagement, anything else that folks wanted to talk about, anything that you want to let me know and I can share back with the consultants.
Thoughts on the communities, on how to use the event for the next community meeting. Did we get everybody's email address, contact information?
Yeah, so if people registered online through Eventbrite, we have their email address. And if they signed in with us last night, we asked for a name and email address. So I can follow up with Christian to see what they have.
Do we have any idea how many people watched us online?
Yeah, so if you hold on 1 second,
I
can
don't need
tell
to
you.
know. I'm just
No, it's
curious as to whether
easy.
we've captured it.
We won't capture logins, obviously, but I can tell you. Just a second. Just looking it up on YouTube right now. 105 people have viewed the video. That's up from last
Wow.
night, which was about 25. And then I checked again this afternoon, it was around 80. So it's up to 105 now. So that's good.
People are looking at the entire recording downstream of it, as
Yes.
opposed to that number doesn't address the people who logged in live last night.
No,
Okay.
no, it's not live views, I don't believe. It's actual just recordings.
Well, that's a pretty good number.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, here's my concern is our next engagement. I thought this last night was really good in terms of educating people about the housing needs in the town. And they really came away with saying, wow, I didn't realize this. That I was the only one, being impacted by this. That the 40% or half the town is impacted by this. So it was a great educational period, and I'm concerned that our next meeting, we have to revisit that whole thing again, because we're going to dive deeper into our, what we're doing as a committee at our next meeting. And
Well,
go ahead,
I'm,
Mike.
I'm sorry. John went into a whole bunch of in the weeds stuff about the way that the committee figures things out, whole
Yeah.
bunch of statistics and so forth. And that's great, by way of establishing credibility. But I don't think anybody really was looking at that to kick the tires or paid much attention, other than it sounded as if the consultants had done a professional job and had earned their money. What the real effect of all of that is to come up with a number, which is the 146K number, which is the threshold upon which affordability is determined in Nahant. And that's done, and that's fine. And I don't suggest that it takes a lot of time of attention of the townsfolk later on to deal with that. I think what is appropriate for us to be looking to do next time is to say, if you want to know about the background of this stuff, the tape still exists, the recording still exists, you can go back and look at it. Here are the challenges that the committee has to deal with, and here are the range of options that we're considering on each on each of our challenges, 40B and 3A, and whatever else we may consider, for example, accessory dwelling units, if that gets thrown into the mix, and be in a position to give people some options to react to, and then begin to take on board their inputs.
Yeah, what I'd like to try to do is the people who attended last night, to view them as ambassadors for our cause, and somehow continue to engage them through
Sure.
social media, however we do it, to encourage their friends, to spread the message, so that we can double the size of our next meeting. But to really view them as ambassadors to our cause.
So I
And
can
great.
follow up with,
That's a wonderful idea,
Yeah.
because I also want to say, did you all see many realtors there last night? I saw
yes,
Couple.
one.
there are 3 realtors that were there last night that
I saw
No.
at least one that I knew.
Yeah, and I had one at my table who was very engaged,
Mhm.
which I thought was
Positively,
great.
even.
Positively.
positively, yeah. Both of them I talked to were positively engaged, yes.
To me, that becomes very important, because we've had the influence of realtors in other ways.
Mhm.
So I'm seconding and thirding what Mark just said about the people who are there should become our ambassadors,
Mhm.
especially the informed ones.
So yeah, I can follow up with Krista on that, and the communication can come from us directly, or it can come through MAPC. So I can definitely work with them on how to best get those messages out. Like, it could be a follow-up to say, thanks for attending, really appreciate it. Here's some highlights for you. Hopefully you'll share this with your family and friends, that kind of stuff. And let them know when our next meeting is, so they can certainly, listen or attend.
Yep.
So that's good.
You're
just-
muted, Jim. You're muted.
God, terrible. But back in 2008, Mark took care of all this. He went house to house delivering these things. I don't see why he can't do that again.
Nice one, Jim. Nice.
Step up, Mark. Come on.
I used to get paid for that.
Oh, that's right. I forgot that.
All right.
Jim,
So
you get
let's
the
move-
best one tonight.
So let's move on in the interest of time. The other 2 items I had were around the housing needs assessment, the PowerPoint content presentation, and the executive summary. I know a few of us have already sent some written feedback for MAPC, but I wanted just to open up these topics to you all to see if there was anything else you wanted to cover. I'm happy to pull the documents up and we can do a page turn. Or you can send your comments directly to John, because over the next few weeks, we'd like to finalize those documents. They're in draft format right now. They are published on the town website, but we do want to close those out so we can move on to the other deliverables and timelines, and I'll get the rest of that information from John now that we've resolved the kind of the contract stuff with the town.
By contract stuff, you mean approving the content of what they put in that study?
That and the timeline, because we had an issue with the timeline where the work was going to wrap up in June. It's now been extended till October. And the part of that was because of the MBTA 3A communities piece as well, because we have to
Okay.
close that out and have it ready so that planning board can pick up on that and do their review and hold their hearings, and then FinCom will need to look at it. So I was when talking with Tony, an important distinction on that is we will likely be an article, a zoning article for town meeting in 2024. So it's important that we keep that on our top of our minds as well.
So in addition to what they've already done, and in addition to answering some of the questions of the kind that we've addressed tonight, what is it that we expect the consultants to be doing for us in the future? Are they meant to guide us in terms of drafting articles or drafting matter to go before the planning board? Or what exactly is it that they do other than what they've already done and digested?
Yeah, so we'll definitely be drafting an article for zoning that we'll have to put forth with the planning board, but the planning, before that article happens, like, we're gonna have to have some dedicated meetings with the planning board to go over proposed zoning options for
Right.
3A. We don't know what those could be. It could be a complete overlay of the town. It could be certain
Yep.
sections. It's gonna be very similar to tonight's discussion around locations for the housing, the housing production plan. 3A could, come up, and that's gonna lead us into a separate discussion as well. Let me just take a quick look here at something.
Just on that, on the 3A issue, Michelle, maybe it might be a good idea for the committee and invite Tony to join us just on a discussion of 3A issue.
Okay.
I mean, how the town wants to address the 3A issue. If we do it all.
I'm sorry, what was the last bit you said, Mark?
How we address the 3A issue. I mean, there are some communities in the Commonwealth that have basically said we're not complying. Right?
Yes, there's been some news around that.
And I don't know what Tony's position. I really don't know what his position on this. I know some of his thoughts around it. I don't know what his position is on it. Is the town in the position where we just say, you know what, we're not going to deal with this 3A issue, and we're not going to be concerned because we're not applying for those grants anyway? Or are we going to try to address it somehow?
But it's not just applying for grants, Mark. It's funding that we get from the state and federal government that could impede the housing authority and create a tax burden on the taxpayer.
That's why I think we need to have a separate meeting with the town administrator on this.
Okay.
Well,
I do have a presentation on Section 3, the Section 3A program from the Citizen Planner Training Collaborative that I attended in December. I'm happy to share it. It has some good content information about multifamily zoning requirements. Just more, I'm always big on sharing information that's going to help others as we go through this process. So I'll make sure I'll send this out to folks.
I'd like to ask a question on that topic. Is it because we get four buses a day that we are
No,
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 it's because
No.
we're adjacent to Lynn.
it has
Alright.
nothing to do with the busing per se. It's more around rapid transit. And so the commuter rail is the rapid transit. And we're 5 or 6 miles from the blue line. So that doesn't even count. It's the commuter rail. And
1 mile.
we're 1 mile away.
Okay.
Which truthfully, it's actually 3 miles.
Well, the Rotary is, so maybe we zone the Rotary as a
affordable housing.
Yes.
I think you had that idea a while ago, Jim.
What's wrong? Well, technically, don't we own the land where the ball fields are next to the DCR? Couldn't we
No.
develop that?
No, it's territorial in Nahant's territory, but it's owned by DCF.
Okay. Oh, well.
Well, so that presentation that you've got, Michelle, sounds like it'd be good to digest, but I do think it's worth us knowing what all the ramifications are of non-compliance with 3A. Because, I mean, I don't know, Tony may have studied it all, but if he hasn't, he needs to before we blow that off.
Yeah,
So I
good
can
point.
do some research as well and see what I can find out and send it out to the committee.
We might also contact Senator Crichton to see what kinds of discussions are going on. Because there might be some adjustments that would be made to that legislation, as I understand it.
You say there's some of the pipeline, you think?
Yes, because there's been a lot of negative.
Right.
And
Pushback?
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Brendan unfortunately fell and broke his shoulder, so, but I think he should be pretty much repaired now. But we had a couple of conversations about that, and as
Yeah.
I understand it, but nothing in detail, but contacting him would be a good idea.
Yeah, so we know minimally, I'm just doing a quick search right now, we'd be ineligible for certain funding sources from the state. So,
And the
But-
funding sources of which we have taken advantage in the past?
well, I would have to confirm that with Tony, what funding sources the Housing Authority has taken advantage of from the state. But if you think about, we just did the new facade down on Greystone Road, so I don't know if that was state or federal. They redid windows and stuff
No,
on Spring Road.
Community preservation,
Oh, that
Right.
was community preservation. Okay, so that clarifies.
no state money at all.
No state money. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's really important to kind of clarify some of that, to understand what we do get as a funding source to support the Housing Authority. But that's
Right.
good to know that it was CPC. So I'm glad to hear that. It looks wonderful. And
It,
there
it,
was,
it does, but that's a big problem. They have, the reason why CPC is so important to the Housing Authority for maintaining their buildings is they
Mhm.
cannot get the state money for maintenance. You know, big capital project like the elevator, which they had
Yes.
to really do. You know, that worked out. Mickey Long was very instrumental in making that happen. But the Housing Authority rules are tangled, very
what
tangled.
about like the window replacements on Spring Road and stuff? Was that CPC as well?
Yeah.
Really?
The rules of the Nahant Housing Authority or state rules that govern the Housing Authority?
State rules that govern
State
the
rules.
Housing Authority and their money.
Oh, so we're not unique in having trouble getting operating funds.
We're
Okay,
not unique.
all right.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so I would say is if you have any feedback or comments around the housing needs assessment and its executive summary, get those to John. So we
Mhm.
can get those deliverables finalized. We moved things around on the agenda tonight and covered a lot of the new business items on 40B. I just want to look through some of the questions.
In terms of the things I sent you, Michelle, I think we've covered the
Covered.
waterfront on that. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have any new business items they wanted to talk about tonight?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Jim.
I think we should take a vote now to congratulate Michelle for all her hard work.
Here, here.
I mean, I think that would probably be unanimous. That was a great job, Michelle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
first rate.
Thank
Well-
you.
Yeah,
Fabulous.
wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you. I don't have anything other than I did send out the list of action items. We're largely closed out on a majority of them and in good shape there, so there's nothing new. We'll have the meeting on April 13th. And that's really all I have. So may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
That was Mark?
Jim,
Jim.
Jim, sorry, I'm taking some notes, that's why. And is there a second?
I'll second.
And that was Patty. Okay, so roll call vote. Mark,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes,
Patty,
Yes.
Michael.
Yes.
The chair is aye. It is 7:54 and we're adjourning the meeting. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.
thank you,
It was good to
Take
see
Michelle.
care.
everyone.
Nicely done.
All
Nicely
right, we'll
done.
Nicely
talk to you
done.
later. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye
Bye now.
bye.